In early 2025, the world was stunned by a declaration from Washington, D.C. The new Trump administration threatened to retake control of the Panama Canal, a move not seen in generations. President Trump's inaugural address signaled the end of what he called passive observation over U.S. strategic interests. The Panama Canal, a vital maritime shortcut, was suddenly at the center of a global crisis. The immediate trigger escalating tolls by the Panama Canal Authority and China's growing influence in the region. U.S. officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, warned that Chinese-controlled ports at both ends of the canal could threaten its operation in a crisis. The administration framed its threat as a necessary step to protect American commerce and security. Global markets reacted with alarm. Shipping companies scrambled to assess the fallout. Even a brief closure or militarization of the canal would devastate global supply chains, raising costs and causing delays worldwide. The world's reliance on just-in-time trade was suddenly in question. This was more than a political dispute, it was a direct challenge to the post-Cold War order. For decades, the canal symbolized Panama's sovereignty and international cooperation. The U.S. threat to seize control felt like a return to gunboat diplomacy, raising questions about sovereignty and the future of global trade. The crisis was about more than a canal. It was about the rules that govern the world. Would those rules be rewritten by force? The world held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The stakes had never been higher. The Panama Canal was now the flashpoint for a new era of geopolitical tension. The Panama Canal is the beating heart of global trade. For over a century, this 51-mile waterway has connected the Atlantic and Pacific, saving ships from an 8,000-mile detour around South America. Each year, thousands of vessels, carrying everything from Asian cars to U.S. grain, pass through its locks. 70% of canal traffic is tied to U.S. ports, making it critical for American supply chains. Any disruption means higher prices and shortages for consumers. For the U.S. Navy, the canal is a strategic asset enabling rapid movement between oceans. In 2016, Panama expanded the canal to accommodate larger ships, cementing its role in 21st century commerce. But this indispensability also makes the canal a target for geopolitical tension. When a single waterway handles so much trade, any threat to its operation is a threat to the world. The current crisis is a stark reminder. The canal's smooth operation can't be taken for granted. Governments and corporations now face the reality of what happens if this lifeline is severed. The consequences would ripple through every corner of the global economy. The world is watching and worrying. The U.S.-Panama relationship has always revolved around the canal. In 1903, U.S. support for Panamanian independence led to American control of the waterway. For most of the 20th century, the U.S. governed the Canal Zone, an arrangement that bred resentment in Panama. Decades of protest led to the Torrijos-Carter treaties in 1977, setting a path for the U.S. to hand over the canal by the end of 1999. The handover was celebrated as a victory for Panamanian sovereignty. A neutrality treaty declared the canal open to all nations, with the U.S. and Panama as joint guarantors. However, a U.S. Senate reservation allows unilateral American action if canal operations are threatened, a point now at the center of the crisis. Since 1999, Panama has managed the canal efficiently, completing a major expansion without U.S. help. The recent U.S. threats shocked many, seeming to ignore Panama's 2 decades of competent stewardship. Old wounds reopened, reminding the world of the complex, often unequal history between the two nations. The crisis is not just about economics or security, it's about sovereignty and trust. The future of the canal and the region hangs in the balance. The world is watching to see if history will repeat itself. The crisis didn't appear overnight. A severe drought, fueled by El Niño, forced the Panama Canal Authority to restrict daily ship transits, creating costly bottlenecks. To fund water security projects, Panama hiked canal tolls, some by over 200%, sparking outrage in Washington and among shippers. U.S. officials saw the increases as punitive, especially for American exports. Meanwhile, China's economic footprint in Panama grew, with Chinese firms operating key ports at both canal entrances. U.S. security officials warned these companies could help China disrupt canal access in a crisis. Secretary of State Rubio declared the canal was already in the arms of the Chinese. For the new U.S. administration, drought, toll hikes, and Chinese influence formed a single, unacceptable threat. The response, a bold, controversial threat to retake control. The stage was set for a showdown over the world's most important waterway. The stakes could not be higher. Panama's response was swift and defiant. President Mulino denounced the U.S. threat as an attack on sovereignty, declaring, "The Panama Canal belongs to the Panamanians." The entire country across the political spectrum united in opposition. Panama Canal Authority officials defended their tolls as essential for long-term viability and water security. They rejected claims of Chinese control, insisting the canal's administration and security remain Panamanian. Across Latin America, leaders voiced solidarity with Panama, condemning U.S. threats as a return to colonialism. The region warned that any U.S. action would be seen as aggression against all of Latin America. Decades of U.S. intervention have left a legacy of mistrust. Today, Latin American nations are more assertive, unwilling to accept dictates from Washington. The crisis revealed a new regional unity, and a clear warning to the U.S. force would mean isolation. The message was unmistakable: sovereignty is not negotiable. U.S. intervention in Panama would carry enormous risks. The most immediate disruption of global shipping. With the Suez Canal already compromised, a Panama shutdown would paralyze supply chains, spike costs, and threaten recession. Politically, a U.S. move would be condemned as a violation of international law and Panama's sovereignty. America's reputation as a defender of the rules-based order would suffer, giving rivals like China and Russia ammunition to criticize U.S. hypocrisy. Ironically, intervention could push Panama and its neighbors closer to Beijing, strengthening China's influence in the region. Security risks are also high. The canal's infrastructure is vulnerable, and any attempt to seize it could trigger sabotage or long-term damage. Cooperation on other issues, like migration through the Darien Gap, would be jeopardized. Alienating Panama could create new crises at the U.S. southern border. The risks of intervention far outweigh the potential gains. The world is watching to see if cooler heads will prevail. The future of hemispheric stability hangs in the balance. The stakes are global. The Panama Canal crisis has exposed the tension between superpower interests and national sovereignty. The U.S. has legitimate concerns about security and Chinese influence, but threats risk backfiring. A sustainable solution requires diplomacy, not coercion. Secretary Rubio's planned visit to Panama offers a chance to de-escalate. Real progress depends on dialogue, addressing tolls, security, and transparency. Panama must also reassure partners by justifying tolls and clarifying its relationships with Chinese firms. The neutrality treaty was meant to foster partnership, not unilateral action. The best path forward is collaboration, reaffirming Panama's sovereignty while ensuring the canal remains open and secure. The challenge protects strategic interests without sacrificing trust. Only partnership can deliver lasting security for the canal and the world.